Hey folks, my name's Ed Trevors. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, Gwe. By now you've heard that the United States, they're planning on canceling some student loan debt. They're planning on canceling up to $10,000 per person that have taken a student loan. Now, I don't really want to get into the conversation of is it enough? Personally, I don't believe it's enough, but I believe that school, education, training should be free. I think there should be options for people who want to go to school. Nobody, how about this? Nobody should ever experience a barrier to going to school, including crippling debt for 25 years after you leave school. Today what I want to do is I want to share with you a parable. Because I often hear two very predominant arguments when it comes to this. Reasons why we shouldn't cancel the student loan, and in particular from Christian circles. And I believe that the parable I'm going to share with you from Matthew chapter 18, I believe it actually addresses both of these arguments and provides us with a really stark warning. So, the arguments that I often hear go along the lines of they knew what they were doing when they took out these loans. I took out a loan. I knew what I was doing. I paid it all off. They should be able to pay it off. It's on them. It's their responsibility. They need to pay it back. They did this knowing exactly what the outcome was going to be. The other argument I hear is the taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook for their mistakes. The taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook for their debt, for the debt that they freely took. The parable that Jesus offers us, actually, it does speak to this. See, he's having a conversation with Peter and the boys. And Peter says, how many times should I forgive my brother? 7 times? Jesus says, no, not 7 times, 7 times 7 times. Infinity. You should forgive infinitely. And he goes on to tell them this story. A man calls one of his servants in, a guy that owes him a whole bunch of money. And he says, I want my money. You owe me money, I want my money. The servant who owes him the money says, I don't have it. The man says, oh, well, okay, take him away until he can pay back the loan. Sell him, sell his family, sell his wife and his children until he can pay back the loan. The man pleads and begs, no, please don't do this, please don't do this, please don't do this. I'll do anything. The master says, I'm going to forgive your debt. I'm going to cancel your debt. I'm wiping it out. See, the master had pity on this person. He had compassion for this person and for his family. He didn't want to sell the man into slavery. He didn't want the man to suffer under the burden that he would need to put him under in order to get his money back. And so he said, you know what? You strike me as very sincere. You strike me as very sincere. I'm going to cancel your debt. You don't owe me anything from now on. You don't owe me nothing. You don't have to pay back anything. The servant, he goes away pretty happy, right? He owed a lot of money. He encounters somebody. He encounters a friend. And this friend owes the servant just a little bit. The servant wants his money. He wants his money from his friend. Give me my money. I don't have it. Fine. And he does horrible things to this person because he doesn't have the money. Now the master, the one whom the servant owed a great deal of money to, he hears about this and he calls the servant back in. What's the deal? He asks. The guy owed me money. But I showed you all this mercy. The servant says, yeah. Master says, grab him, take him, torture him until he can pay back his debt. You've shown no mercy, despite the fact that so much mercy was shown to you. You've shown no compassion, despite the fact that so much compassion was shown to you. Take him, beat him until he can pay me back. In this story, Jesus is warning us. He's saying, listen, you've been forgiven a lot. God has shown you a great deal of mercy, a great deal of compassion. God has offered you a great deal of forgiveness. The slate is clean in God's eyes. And therefore, it's up to you to show that same mercy, same compassion, same level of forgiveness to everyone you encounter. Now, he's not saying it's about sin or it's about fault or it's about blame. It's about life. Okay, this is how you are supposed to live. You are supposed to live a merciful, compassionate, forgiving life. And if you don't, and this is the warning, if you don't, there's going to be hell to pay. All right, it's going to ruin your week. If you live your life without mercy, without compassion, without forgiveness, to this radical extent. And that's what the master exhibit, a radical amount of mercy. That servant who owed the master a great deal of money had no expectation and should have had no expectation that the debt would be canceled. At best, will delay your payment a couple of days. But never would he have ever had the expectation that the debt would literally be wiped out. And yet it is. And that's what you and I, we are called to live that way. We're called to live with this radical godliness that we are willing to forgive and we are willing to be compassionate and we are willing to offer mercy to everybody in every way for everything. So in this parable, when it comes to that one of those arguments that the taxpayer shouldn't be on the hook, well, the truth is, when the master forgave the loan to the servant, the huge amount, it cost the master. He no longer he was not going to get his money back. He was not going to get the amount of the loan back. It was gone. And yet, he was willing to do it. The servant said, no, I'm not giving up. I do not want to lose my money. I want my money, and therefore I'm going to have this guy beaten. I'm going to throw this guy in jail. I'm going to ruin this guy's life until he can give me what is mine. In this case, and in every case, forgiveness comes at a cost. It costs us something to forgive. It costs us something to be merciful and to be compassionate. It's a known thing, and we must be willing to pay that cost. The other side of the argument where we say, well, they knew what they were doing. Well, our sins are, as Christians, we believe that our sins are forgiven. I knew what I was doing when I sinned. You know what you're doing when you sin. Everybody knows what they're doing when they sin. We're doing what we want. Right? We're doing what is fun. We're doing what is wild and crazy. We know what it is. We choose to do it. And yet God still forgives. The master still forgives. This servant took the money out. He knew he was going to have to pay it back. Again, he didn't have an expectation that it would be written off. And yet, he took the money. And yet, mercy was still shown. If we're walking in this world, and we know that people are struggling, and we know that a possible solution is the forgiveness of their debt. And by the way, the Old Testament doesn't ever talk about student loan debt, but it talks about debt in general. It talks about moments, every 7 years, when debt should be wiped out, when loans should be forgiven. Every 50 years, there's the great reset of Jubilee. This is who we're supposed to be as a society, as a loving and caring and wonderful society. When we see people who are struggling under these mounds of debt, whether it's student loan debt or credit card debt or what have you, regardless of why they find themselves in that situation, regardless of whether or not we agree with their choices that have led them to this situation, within the framework of this parable, within this story that Jesus shares with his disciples that we talked about today, we, regardless of how deeply we are connected to those who are affected, regardless of whether we would say we have a horse in that particular race, we are called to be merciful, to be compassionate, and to be forgiving. for the Christians out there. And if you're thinking to yourself, geez, we can't forgive that debt, they knew what they were. Christians should be applauding this. We should be cheering for this. Even if we paid our loans back, we should be cheering that others are finding relief from this pressure. Even if we've never taken a student loan, we should be cheering that others are able to experience mercy and compassion and forgiveness from the government and from the taxpayers. We should be cheering, even if we completely disagree with everything these people have done that have led them into this place. We should be cheering that the weight is being lifted off of them. That the stress is being lifted off of them. That the burden is being lifted off of them. Because we as Christians recognize the relief that comes when our debts are forgiven. We recognize how important it was in our lives and continues to be in our lives, the mercy and the compassion and the forgiveness that God has, does, and will continue to share with us. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. I pray that no matter how we feel about people's decisions, no matter how we feel about what has led them into the place of being indebted, we will cheer when that pressure is relieved. We will cheer when that burden is stripped away. We will cheer when that weight is lifted off of them. We will pray continuously that they, in their life, will experience mercy and compassion and forgiveness, because we have, and we know just how wonderful those moments are. Amen. Numultus.